is way more powerful than Paul Herrera.
And quickly Herrera shoots the leg.
And Herrera's a very good grappler here.
Oh my, elbows in number by Goodridge, and that is it.
Why are you so obsessed with me?
Who I smoke, Lil Leaky. Who I smoke, Big Meaty. Who I smoke, Lil 2, 3 Wonder.
Why are you so obsessed with me?
I was so moved. This is how audiences must have felt when they first saw Olivier play Hamlet. Oh, bravo, boys and girls. Bravo. Except for you. You were god-awful.
Full disclosure, news and commentary number 176 and 177. Double-sized issue again, which is to say I didn't get it done last week. I'm super busy, of course. But I definitely wanted to get full disclosure done, and I almost have my article of the week written. Yeah. Crap ton going on. But no less in the wrestling world. We're going to get to it. We're going to get to it right now. I think Southern States running shows in 2 locations, including West Georgia, is fascinating. You can see reports of the shows on gwhnewsandnotes.blogspot.com. Hell, you can see reports. Another thing that having all of these guys doing reports is doing is it's encouraging the people that do not have a GWH correspondent there to send in detailed reports of their own. Or we're doubling up on reports, like for Viral, who had a very successful show. Southern States often has more than one report kind of attached to it. Action had a good show, though. They put in their own results and didn't give us a crowd number. You can kind of guess what it is. And at this point, you can kind of see where people's crowds are, what their audiences are. And I also think that that's really, really cool. But yeah, sorry, I was calling something up, wasn't I? Our commentary is something completely different. Florida had their primary elections yesterday, and they're wrestling related, believe it or not, and we're going to talk about that in the commentary. But what am I trying to do? I'm trying to find this. KLT Promotions went from the #1 promotion, #1 attended, #1 everything, we're the best, and then I had a bit of fun with them on the last full disclosure, and now they say they're getting super specific. They're no longer the #1 promotion because they realized, as I sarcastically hammered home the point about how like Rumblejack was this sort of great event for Southern Honor, that the SCI was this sort of beautifully laid out wrestling event, and all of that kind of stuff. And Pro South obviously had like the love of the crew and all of that stuff. Now KLT Promotions is billing itself specifically as Georgia's most attended wrestling promotion. Can they make that argument? Okay, let's say they have 2 shows a month, and each one of those shows draw about 250. They would say they would say, no, look at the high-end crowd numbers. Okay, let's say 3. So 2 shows at 300, that's 600. That's assuming they maintain 300. So that puts them over Rumblejack and Southern Honor, who only do 1 show a month. And Southern Honor, for many of their shows in the beginning of the year, and now Rumblejack, have drawn 500 plus. Keep that in mind, right? So, okay. So I guess if you want to add things together, I remember once Southern Fried making this argument about how they were more attended than Southern Honor because if you put our crowds together, we draw more. Now Southern Fried, as you can see in the latest report, is now drawing around the 200 mark. So they can't make that little dubious claim, but KLT can. When you look at a show like Mucha Lucha, they're drawing 1,200, but they're only doing 1 show every 3 months. So KLT can say that they outdraw them as well. Though I think gate-wise, it's not even close. I mean, you know, the first row sold of Mucha Lucha outdraws probably every KLT show put together in that same time frame. But nonetheless, KLT has now, and this is me giving them credit, they're being as honest as they can now. They're no longer claiming a high degree of quality. They're just saying it's the most attended wrestling promotion. If they maintain 300. If they don't maintain 300, then they slip below Mucha Lucha and they slip below groups like Southern Honor in spite of doing twice as many shows. So I just found that sort of an interesting thing that they felt the need to talk about. But this thing is wild. Cruel, Mads Kruger, Logan Creed. On this day in history, this was like a week ago, but Paul Orndorff and I kidnapped a promoter and took him to his mother's house where we got money to pay all the boys. No one cried on Twitter about not getting paid. Greg Green, oh my God. Was that the last show of any note where we had these issues? I think it may have been. Correct me if I'm wrong, and people are very happy to do that often. We have not had the promoter running out on the pay thing in a long, long, long time. I mean, little things float around when IWN had, you know, eyes bigger than their stomach. The little indications of that, but nothing on this kind of disastrous scale of Greg Green. Paul Orndorff, rest in peace, of course. This is really a great time in wrestling. I talk about wrestling a lot with friends and that kind of thing. And in spite of the fact that wrestling feels like it has grown and it is not growing anymore, wrestling as far as an entity is still rolling along. There's a lot of leagues, a lot of places for the boys to work, a lot of leagues that are drawing very well. I mean, you look at Viral doing 330. That's amazing. You look at APW keeps marching along, of course. Things like Championship District Wrestling, they have a debut show, and they have 251 people there. That's incredible, right? Southern Fried, they draw their 200. The Game Changer, they're at half, but they're still putting hundreds of people in a building. Southern States has their biggest crowd to date at the El Galaxy. And they're getting to claim a bunch of cool stuff. I think, you know, a lot of stuff has come up about Priscilla Kelly. Unfortunately, she got a concussion and won't be able to continue the women's tag tournament that they were put in, that Toxic Attraction was put in, and they advanced. Let's make something clear. The people who can claim, and you know, I had a great conversation with somebody who definitely knew what he was talking about. Here are the people who can claim that they had a hand in Priscilla Kelly's success as far as in-ring training. It is Murder One, And it might even be in this order, but it may not. But it's Murder 1, it's Chip Day, and it's Simon's Sermon. Most other people are just trying to basically attach themselves to a name. I'm going to go ahead and do that and attach myself to a name. The one thing that I think I can claim is that when Priscilla Kelly did the tampon spot, the infamous tampon spot at a bar show, every pundit was saying how she would never get signed and what a big deal it was. And the very first full disclosure was dedicated to me explaining the difference between a bar show and a regular wrestling show is, and how the atmosphere has changed and the landscape has changed in wrestling enough that this tampon spot won't mean shit and she'll still get into the WWE and other big leagues. Turns out I was fucking right. So I'm proud of that one. But the people who should be most proud of the success of Priscilla Kelly, besides, family and friends that supported her along the way and supported her dream, and people like Kiera Hogan, who did a great job of working with Priscilla early, that both of them helped make each other. But Murder, Chip, and Simon's Sermon. Got it? Get it? Good. WrestleMerica is drawing 245. So you see that lots of people are drawing incredibly well. This is a really good time. The Cruel thing is fantastic, though. How was that open, by the way? What was that open? It was obviously a UFC fight. What it was the very first UFC fight, in case you didn't know. The very first thing that they aired. And I remember that pay-per-view showing. I was in college at the time. And they showed it on the giant, like, wall-sized screen while we played video games in the sort of lounge at University of Hawaii. So I've seen every UFC event since, either at the time or afterwards. I love that shit. Super cool. What else is going on? Bloop. Oh boy. Vince Russo and his shit take. My article this week was going to be about how we live in the age of the shit take and calling out basically all the major voices in wrestling for their shitty takes. But I got inspired to write something else. So I'm going to keep that shit take one in my back pocket. But Vince Russo's shit take was, as a shoot. Oh, God. He says, as a shoot. I'm really trying to understand why there are those who think Triple H's Raw is an improvement over Vince McMahon's. Outside of him bringing NXT talent back, what is the difference in the show? Truly looking for your thoughts to understand. Thanks. The differences are really atmospheric and this idea of giving matches more length. Russo is a guy who, when he had his way, wanted to make wholesale changes immediately, which tend to not work. I will say that I don't watch Raw with any more happiness, but the news coming out of there and the frequency at which at least there's one good match that people advise me to watch, and so I do, that's definitely a change. And there's just a feeling that they're going to involve everybody with angles that tend to make more sense and not drop things as readily. But we're going to have to see how things play out. I'm always interested when Vince Russo, like all shit takers, has kind of fallen into this thing of, I'm going to just take this extreme position in order to gain attention. Anyway. Boy, oh boy. So, if you look at Georgia wrestling history, if you look at the wrestling, Game Changer Wrestling is running shows in Atlanta. It's wild. Southern States continues to advance as the show that the boys really love. There are 9 to 12 shows happening every weekend in or around the Georgia area. If you look at that poignant piece that Larry wrote about them removing everything from the Pro South building, and I felt something looking at those pictures and reading Larry's description of the events. It's really an incredible time. Of course, we hope that Pro South can find a building soon and start running, and we hope Ace Haven feels better soon. But man, oh man, there is so much wrestling on TV. And the news cycle has flipped so completely. AEW, which seemed like it could do no wrong, now seems like it's basically on its heels and on the defensive in more ways than one. Is the CM Punk thing a shoot or a work? And the news seems not as pure as it once was out of AEW. And WWE right now is getting their own honeymoon period. How long that's going to last will probably remain to be seen, but it will also entail how much can they do good stuff, right? The next pay-per-view will be a great indication of how things are truly changed and are really moving along. And what's Triple H's health status, and how long is he going to be able to maintain what he's doing? And how many times can you just do the thing of, well, we're bringing this person back? We're going to have to see about all of that. But it's certainly a fascinating time. I'll say this, the Southern Honor thing, and this is just my opinion. So they've announced, I guess, War Games is probably going to take place for their anniversary show, in which Gunnar Miller is involved. I really hope if Gunnar Miller is to win this title, that it isn't in some multi-man match thing. I don't know why they can't just fucking build a guy up and have him chase and have him win. I don't know why they will not do that simple, satisfying storytelling thing in order to give it. Watching that last episode of Better Call Saul was a reminder of how important storytelling is and how important things feeling earned and then having a discernible finish where a viewpoint is expressed and a vision is realized is. Especially when you have like House of the Dragon starting. The first episode was amazing. But it's having to go a long way to dig itself out from under the disaster that was the finish of Game of Thrones, where they took a show that was almost universally loved and lauded, and people were chomping at the bit, and we have to wait 1.5 years for the finale, but we're going to stick it out because it's good, and then you just flush that goodwill down the toilet. How you finish off a story in an angle is the most important thing, to be quite honest. And I hope Southern Honor gives that story of Gunnar Miller chasing the title and overcoming the odds true justice. And I'm worried that they're not going to. But at the same time, we're going to see how it plays out. Commentary. Drake Wuertz, you know who that is. He's a former deathmatch wrestler who was a referee for NXT, who said a bunch of like vaguely racist things, and then he was a QAnon believer and all this stuff, though he's disavowed the QAnon thing. I don't believe that. But he was running for 38th district, and he got, all right, boop, what is that? That is, that is how much money he spent $22,000 on his campaign, and that's a list of the donors. And if you look at the donors, they are the top 2 donors have his last name, and that's almost 7,000 out of the 22,000. So a third of it is that, and then you have Valerie at the bottom there. So a third are direct members of the family. Almost all of the others are friends. His campaign did not have a ton of donors that weren't people that immediately knew him, which is death. His campaign centered around make sure abortions are illegal and other like super hard right stances. He always spouted the same, they're grooming and pedophiles, like the same claptrap that you're hearing. And it isn't just about the fact that he's far right as opposed to far left. It's just that I mean, when you look at the stuff that he posts, even post losing this election, which he lost the primary. How bad? Boop. Dude, he got less than 20% of the vote in Seminole County, which I took to be a hopeful thing. I don't know what's going on. I mean, I'm glad he lost in the primary. And honestly, the Republican Party should be happy as well, because if he somehow managed to win that, he wasn't going to win in the general. It would have been insane. When you look at the story of that guy in wrestling, and you look at the kind of campaign he ran, and of course most people didn't, but I was really interested because I'm not in Seminole County. I'm in Orange County. Seminole County is very far away. It's in like Gainesville kind of area. But man, oh man, like his ability to put on this gimmick, like it was all things that he learned in wrestling, which wrestling is very applicable to politics, as you all know, as you would be able to figure out if you had half a brain. But the great thing was, at the end of the day, his campaign had no money. His campaign wasn't able to generate money. He was one of the how I found that list of his campaign things. Like, you're like, oh God, Steve, you dug deep. I didn't have to dig deep, because they were like the 10 most expensive campaigns and the 10 least expensive campaigns. And his was amongst the 10 least expensive. Now, people, you might say, well, Steve, that's smart of him. It's not smart of him. He and his immediate family had to put up a third of the money. His friends probably comprised at least another third. He just didn't have donors en masse. But he put up all the right pictures. Here's my wife helping with this, and she's the love of my life. Like, he's crafted this perfect far-right persona. And he thumped his Bible, and it didn't get him anywhere. But as I look at people in wrestling who have learned to apply the skills that they learned in wrestling, sometimes it works. Certainly there are politicians such as Kane who have managed to make it work in the small town in Tennessee where he is the mayor. And he can say dumb things and it becomes a strength. But I think you can do that once you're in. Like Kane is like, you know, he's going to be an incumbent. But Drake's inability to even cover up the fact, I mean, when you're having to disavow QAnon stuff in order to seem more legitimate, but clearly you still use the lingo, still have the mentality. It's crazy to say this, but it's weird that the voters kind of saw through it. Or maybe he just didn't get his name out there enough, which is on him. In any case, I think about the people in Georgia wrestling who I could imagine having political aspirations. And as soon as I say that, okay, imagine certain people having political aspirations. What names popped into your head? And I'm not saying they're the same as Drake, okay? I mean, you might think Chad Lale, who is closer to Drake. You might think Matt Griffin is somebody who I can imagine running for something someday. I could imagine Gary Lamb, certainly, just as a general thing. Though Gary probably wouldn't want the headache, but I don't know that for sure. Who else would run for office? And are there voices I'm not thinking of? Steve, why is that even worth thinking about? Because I'm always curious, because a number of wrestling people seem to have very strong opinions about social issues and politics, but which of them would be able to adapt the skills? The difference between high school education and college education. I had this debate recently with somebody who had said that you don't need college, you just need YouTube. And my thing was like, there's all kinds of college teaches you how to, in a perfect world, or at least in an ideal sense. But I think in practice, college teaches you to take information that you memorize or that you acquire at the high school level and how to apply it. And there are a number of people who are really good at being wrestling people. Maybe now more than ever in Georgia wrestling. But who's teaching them how to apply these skills to other aspects of their lives and in other areas? I'll tell you, now that I work like a demon, lots of people talk about how hard they work. Okay. And I'm not here to dispute that. I will just say, I'm going on 90 hours a week. 3 different jobs. And one of the more satisfying things in this really exhausting sort of marathon that I'm doing currently, with a plan to tamp it down in February, but February is 6 months away, so it's a lot. But the plan is, like, being able to apply the skills I acquired in wrestling at my jobs that are very different from one another is invaluable. And the endurance that I had to learn of really wrestling full time, 5 to 8 times a week for a run there, and the training, which was grueling, and the travel because I actually traveled, which was rough, but being able to apply those kind of skills as well. Drake was not able to do that because he couldn't hide who he was, who he really was, as much as he tried in order to win an election. He wasn't able to really marshal resources. And now the thing is being filled with platitudes of course, you can make it happen, brother, and this is just the first step and you'll make it happen. I really don't think he will. But I would like to think that a lot of the people who are especially in charge of stuff in Georgia wrestling, but even people who lead, wrestlers who other people look towards, who could make a political run, who could apply the skills the best. I just want you to think about that as a mental exercise, because I'm going to as well. I'm going to get that article out in the next day or two. I have to, because this weekend I am booked solid. I'm not going to have barely time to catch a nap, much less write anything. But I've written more than half that article. We'll talk about that at another time, maybe in a Patreon video. In any case, think. Who could run? Not necessarily who would run. I would say that very few people will actually run. They've got too much going on. Gary Lamb's a great example. I don't think that guy's going to run for office. Just because he's got too many things in order to try to generate an income. He's got too many combat sports things to start and stop and all the rest of that, right? And he's got other business ventures, I'm sure, that he's got to devote himself to. He doesn't have time to run for whatever in Canton or otherwise. But I think it's interesting to think about who would best be able to apply skills if they were running for office. I think the answers may surprise you, and you may even look internally and go, could I run for something someday? And if so, how would I go about doing it? It could prove to be a very fruitful exercise mentally. This has been Full Disclosure.